Or ano ba ang kino-consider natin? Is it the microorganism? Or kung saan ang naging resulta ng culture and sensitivity? No? So these are the things that we will consider in giving of the antibiotics. So it's either pwede siyang treatment or po pwede din siyang prophylaxis. So that's the last part of the discussion. Okay, kaya nga siya clinical application. So you can have your breakfast while watching the video. And I know you are doing that right now. That's why your camera are off. Pwede namang mag-camera, wag lang papakita yung malaking subo ninyo. Okay, and don't forget that you will have your quiz. Your preloading is at 9:30. Okay? So, log out tayo ng 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock ang log out nyo, ha? So, I'll share the antibiotics. Share sound. And share. And share. Our topic for this morning is on antimicrobial 2, and it has 4 parts. So the first part is tackling about sulfonamides and trimethoprim. The second part is on quinolones. And the third part is on the miscellaneous drugs, primarily the urinary antiseptics. And the last part is the clinical application of these antimicrobials. Drugs that are included in this group are the sulfacetin, sulfisoxazole, sulfamethisole, sulfadiazine, sulfamethoxazole. So if you're familiar with the Bactrim, so that's the sulfamethoxazole, sulfapyridine, and sulfadoxine. While the pyrimidines include your trimethoprim and pyrimethamine. Sulfonamides are antifolate drug, and its formula and structure is similar to your para-amino-benzoic acid or your PABA. So these sulfonamides have physical, chemical, pharmacologic, and antibacterial property that is produced by attaching the amido group and to the amino group of the sulfanilamide nucleus. This drug is more stable in alkaline pH than in acid pH. So most of this are in sodium salts, which are used for the intravenous administration. So this pathway is essential for the production of purine and nucleic acid synthesis. So as a structural analog of your PABA, the sulfonamide inhibit dihydropteroate synthase and folate production. Sulfonamides primarily inhibit both the gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria, your nocardia, chlamydia trachomatis, and some of the protozoa. So this is an antibacterial, and at the same time, it is an anti-protozoal agent. Combination of a sulfonamide with an inhibitor of dihydrofolate reductase. So this is with your trimethoprim or pyrimethamine that will provide a synergistic activity because of the sequential inhibition of the folate synthesis. If you look at the activity of sulfonamide against anaerobes, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, and even Rickettsia, they have a very poor activity. In fact, in Rickettsia, it is not inhibited by sulfonamide but are instead stimulated in the growth of this microorganism. Sulfonamide resistance may occur as a result of mutation that cause the overproduction of PABA. It can also cause the production of a folic acid synthesizing enzyme, that has low affinity for sulfonamides or impair the permeability to sulfonamide. And dihydroxysteroid synthase with low sulfonamide affinity is often encoded on a plasmid that is transmissible and can disseminate rapidly and widely. So sulfonamide-resistant dihydroxysteroid synthase mutants also can emerge under selective pressure. Resistance to trimethoprim is almost the same with your sulfonamide because it also has a reduced permeability, the overproduction of your dihydrofolate reductase or production of altered reductase with the reduced binding, drug binding. So either by mutation or plasmid-encoded trimethoprim-resistant dihydrofolate reductase, but more commonly due to the plasmid-encoded trimethoprim-resistant dihydrofolate reductase. Sulfonamide is well distributed and well absorbed in the body fluid and tissue. And commonly, this is combined with trimethoprim. However, this trimethoprim is more lipid-soluble than sulfonamide, particularly your sulfamethoxazole. This is the combination of your Bactrim that is available in the market. That's why there is only one part of your trimethoprim and 5 parts of sulfamethoxazole because your trimethoprim has a large volume of distribution compared to your sulfamethoxazole. Both your sulfonamide and trimethoprim are excreted in the urine. And if you have patients with a reduce of your CREA clearance of about 15 to 30 ml per minute, you need to adjust the dose into half of these two drugs because this is primarily excreted, as I said, in the urine. And this sulfonamide has a weak base which has a more antibacterial activity. That's why among cases of infection from the prostate or the vaginal secretion, this drug is a very good drug for these cases. Sulfonamides are differentiated based on their half-life and oral absorption because there are some drugs which has a short half-life, that is your sulfacetin, sulfaceoxazole, and sulfamethisole, and they are promptly absorbed, no? And like in the other with an intermediate half-life, your sulfadiazine, sulfamethoxazole, and sulfapyridine, and they are also absorbed slowly. Unlike the one with the longest half-life, your sulfadoxine, with an intermediate oral absorption. These are the differences of these sulfonamide based on their half-life and oral absorption. While your pyrimidine, trimethoprim has an intermediate half-life, and pyrimethamine has a longer half-life of 4 to 6 days, and both of them are promptly absorbed orally. These sulfonamides are clinically used either as an oral absorbable, oral non-absorbable, and topical agent. So let's look at them one by one. Among the oral absorbable agents, sulfasoxazole and sulfamethoxazole are used for cases of urinary tract infection, while sulfadiazine in combination with pyrimethamine is used for toxoplasmosis as a first-line agent, while your sulfadoxine, which is a long-acting sulfonamide that is co-formulated with your pyrimethamine, that is the Fansidar, and it is used as a second line of treatment of malaria. The non-absorbable agent sulfonamide is used for ulcerative colitis, enteritis, and IBD, or inflammatory bowel diseases. And this is with the use of your sulfasalazine. This is a combination of your sulfapyridine and 5-amino salicylic acid. So the Sulfonamide component here is the sulfapyridine. The sulfonamide that is used for topical agent for the treatment of bacterial conjunctivitis and trachoma as an adjunctive therapy is the sulfacetamide. So the preparation is an ophthalmic solution or ointment. While in burns, this sulfonamide that is used before is the muffinide acetate. However, this has been pulled out in the market because of the cause of your muffinide, which is metabolic acidosis. So that's why the more common now is the sulfadiazine, your silver sulfadiazine. So this is the yellow cream that is available at the emergency room if a patient is admitted for burn. So your sulfadiazine for burn wound and sulfacetamide for conjunctivitis. The clinical uses of trimethoprim is almost the same with sulfamethoxazole. In fact, if you combine it with sulfamethoxazole, that can be used for patients with pneumocystis carinii pneumonia. So that is the PCP. Ay pwede din sa shigellosis or systemic salmonella infection or even complicated UTI, prostatitis, and for mycobacterial infection, the non-tuberculous type. With Staph aureus, you can also use your oral trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole and some of the respiratory tract pathogen. That includes your pneumococci, Haemophilus, Moraxella, Cataralis, and your Klebsiella. That does not include your Mycoplasma pneumonia. Even in the prophylaxis, so in recurrent UTI, this combination is also used. Parenteral trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole is used for the moderately severe to severe type of PCP. Also for bacterial sepsis, the gram-negative type, which are the MDR species such as your Enterobacter and Serratia, together with typhoid fever, shigellosis, and UTI. The sulfonamide, if combined with oral pyrimethamine, this is commonly used for toxoplasmosis and leishmaniasis as well as malaria. So, parasite are the common target of the combination of your pyrimethamine and sulfonamides. So, sulfadiazine for leishmaniasis and toxoplasmosis, sulfadoxine for malaria. For the adverse effect of sulfonamide, drugs that contain the sulfonamide moiety were considered to be cross-allergenic, like the antimicrobial sulfa, the diuretics, and diazoxide and sulfonylurea. However, these drugs were considered to be cross-allergenic and cross-reactivity is uncommon. So patients allergic to the non-antibiotic sulfonamide may safely receive sulfonamide antibiotics. So meaning, if a patient is hypertensive and she is receiving diuretics and she develop infection, she can receive the sulfonamide even if there is an allergy to this diuretics that contains the sulfonamide moiety, because it says here that the cross-reactivity is uncommon to these types of drugs. Other adverse effect may be fever, rashes, and dermatitis and photosensitivity, as well as urticaria. Stevens-Johnson syndrome is one of the adverse effects of sulfonamide, and this is a serious and potentially fatal problem that is caused by sulfonamide, but it only accounts to around 1%. Other unwanted effects include stomatitis, conjunctivitis, and arthritis, and even hematopoietic disturbances. So, sulfonamide can cause hemolytic and aplastic anemia, or even granulocytopenia and thrombocytopenia or leukemoid reaction. So, this sulfonamide may provoke the hemolytic reaction among patients with G6PD, And this sulfonamide, if taken near the end of pregnancy, it increases the risk of kernicterus in the newborn. So other adverse effect of your sulfonamide are crystalluria that is seen in sulfadiazine. So it may precipitate in the urine. So that's why you advise the patient to take sodium bicarbonate for the urine alkalinization and take a lot of water for an adequate hydration. So this crystalluria is rarely seen in sulfasoxazole because this is the form of a more soluble sulfonamide. The picture depicted here is an example of the Stevens-Johnson syndrome that is primarily affecting the mucous membrane. So there is an eruption. No? So eruption of the mucous membrane that will present as an stomatitis. And this is quite fatal, although this is a rare condition that is observed in sulfonamide. This is a different presentation of Stevens-Johnson syndrome, wherein there can be a typical rash distribution or the redness and blisters and erosion, so that affects the lips and inside the mouth. So this primarily affect the mucous membrane, or sometimes it appears as an irritation of the eye, or there's a redness of the eye, or there is an erosion of this eyelid. And these are some of the presentation of patients with Stevens-Johnson syndrome. One of the rare adverse effect of sulfonamide, so the presence of this polyarteritis nodosa. Crystalluria is an adverse effect of sulfonamide, particularly the sulfadiazine, and this is treated with sodium bicarbonate and with hydration. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, the hematopoietic disturbances that may be present in patients as an adverse effect of sulfonamide include hemolytic anaplastic anemia, thrombocytopenia, granulocytopenia, and leukemioid reaction. Or it can provoke the hemolytic reaction in patients with G6PD. And if given in the last trimester of pregnancy, this increases the risk of kernicterus in the newborn. So this is contraindicated, especially on the third trimester because of the kernicterus. And this drug is also contraindicated during the first trimester because this can affect the organogenesis. So, in other words, if the drug is to be given on the second trimester of pregnancy, if this is the only drug that is available, that the patient will be relieved from, for example, urinary tract infection. So, during the second trimester, this sulfonamide is safely given for pregnant patient. Yellowish discoloration of the newborn. So that is caused by the sulfonamide, so the so-called kernicterus. This is observed when the drug is given during the third trimester of pregnancy. Adverse effect of trimethoprim is almost the same with your sulfonamide, so affecting the hematopoietic system, creating the anemia, leukopenia, and even granulocytopenia. Nausea and vomiting is observed, drug fever, vasculitis, renal damage, and CNS disturbances. And the other condition that may be observed, especially in patients with AIDS. So again, these are the drugs that belongs to the sulfonamide group. Your sulfacetin and sulfasoxazole and sulfamethisole, which has a short half-life and promptly absorbed orally, while the intermediate half-life is your sulfadiazine and sulfamethoxazole with sulfapyridine. And the longest of these sulfonamides is your sulfadoxine with an intermediate oral absorption. And of course, the trimethoprim as part of this discussion. Okay, we are now on the second part of my topic about the fluoroquinolones. These are the different quinolones that is divided into different generation. So the non-fluorinated are the first generation, while the fluorinated are the second generation and the third generation. So you have on the first, your nalidixic acid, oxalinic acid, and siloxacin, norfloxacin, ofloxacin, inoxacin, ciprofloxacin. That's your ciprobay. Pefloxacin, levofloxacin, that is your Levox, your lemofloxacin, your gatifloxacin are the third generation with gemifloxacin and the moxifloxacin. So the important quinolones are the synthetic fluorinated analogs of nalidixic acid because they are active against gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria. Earlier quinolones, such as nalidixic acid, did not achieve the systemic antibacterial level and were useful only in the treatment of lower urinary tract infection. While the fluorinated derivatives, no, they have a greatly improved antibacterial activity compared with the nalidixic acid, which achieve its bactericidal level both in the blood and the tissues. Inhibition of the bacterial topoisomerase 2, they are DNA gyrase, and topoisomerase 4 are the mechanism of action of your quinolones. So the inhibition of your DNA gyrase or your topo2 prevents the relaxation of the positively coiled DNA. That is required for normal transcription and replication. While the inhibition of topo4, it interferes with the separation of the replicated chromosomal DNA into the respective daughter cells during the division. So, Topo 2 prevents relaxation, while Topo 4 will interfere with the separation of this replicated chromosomal DNA. The resistance of quinolones is due to mutation in the target enzyme or to a change in the permeability of the organism. And recently, the two types of plasmid-mediated resistance, one utilizes the QNR proteins, the one which protect the DNA gyrase from the fluoroquinolone, variant of an aminoglycoside acetyltransferase that is capable of modifying the ciprofloxacin. And the other is resistance to one fluoroquinolone, primarily with a very high level that generally confers the cross resistance to all other members of the group. What is the antibacterial activity of the quinolones? So for first generation, it is better active against the gram-negative aerobic but limited activity against the gram-positive bacteria. While the second generation has an excellent gram-negative and moderate to good gram-positive activity. And among the second generation, among the fluorinated, the least active is the norfloxacin. While the most active against gram-negative, especially the Pseudomonas aeruginosa, is ciprofloxacin. While in cases of the LIs, the activity against the gram-positive organism such as the strep pneumo, your levofloxacin, which is an L isomer of the of floxacin. As you increase the generation of fluoroquinolones, it improves its activity. Just like the third generation, it has a better activity against gram-positive, especially the S. pneumonia and other stuff. And it's a very good activity against anaerobes using your moxifloxacin. And for patients with ciprofloxacin-resistant S. pneumo, the gemifloxacin is the one that is given. So all fluoroquinolones, they are all active against atypical pneumonia and against the intracellular pathogen. It also kill the Mycobacteria, TB, and the avium complex. Quinolone is well absorbed after oral administration and well distributed in the different parts of the body with the body fluid and the tissues like the prostate, the stool, the bile, no, the urine. So they are well distributed. However, in the administration of the fluoroquinolone, you have to be careful because it can be impaired by the divalent cation, just like the antacid. So, if your patient is suffering from peptic ulcer disease and the patient is taking antacid, there should be at least 2 hours of interval or 4 hours after any product containing this cation. You may delay the administration of the other drugs. So at least an interval of 2 hours to 4 hours. Um, the route of administration will not matter in cases of quinolone because the serum concentration of an orally administered is just the same as that of given parenterally, and that is by intravenous administration. So the metabolism of the quinolones is primarily in the liver. And when you have the long half-life, no, it may permit the administration may be given for once daily dosing. This quinolones is excreted by tubular secretion or by glomerular filtration. But the tubular secretion may be blocked by the probenecid. Just like the previous drug, in cases of a poor urine output, and the urea clearance is less than 50 ml per minute, there must be dose adjustment. Non-renally cleared are relatively contraindicated in patients with liver failure. The quinolones naman, they are differentiated based as well in half-life and oral bioavailability, but the excretion differs, so they can be grouped according to the renal and non-renal. So there are only two drugs that may not be excreted through the renal route, and that is your gemcitabine and moxifloxacin. While the rest, you can use the renal system as part of the excretion. Just wanted to add here the quinolones, the latest form of quinolone is your delafloxacin. This has the highest peak serum concentration, and your delafloxacin is excreted on both renal and non-renal route. Okay, so please take note of that. Your delafloxacin is the latest quinolones that is added here, which has the highest peak serum concentration among others, and the excretion is by renal and non-renal route. Okay, so let's continue. So, as to the half-life, the longest of this quinolone is the moxifloxacin. And to the bioavailability, the highest of which is the gatifloxacin. The clinical uses of quinolones. So, among patients who is suffering from dysuria or dribbling, and then by urinalysis, there's a pus cell. They may be treated with fluoroquinolones other than the moxifloxacin because they are effective against the one that is caused by Pseudomonas aeruginosa. So this quinolone is also safe for an adequate for bacterial diarrhea that is caused by Shigella, Salmonella, E. coli, and Campylobacter. And lastly, for the fluoroquinolone except norfloxacin, this has a good coverage against the soft tissue disorder, the bone, the joint, and intra-abdominal and respiratory infection. That includes the MDR, the drug resistance caused by the Pseudomonas and Enterobacter. Quinolones are also used for prophylaxis and treatment, and this is exemplified by your ciprofloxacin. It can also be used for the treatment of mycobacterial infection and even for eradication of meningococci form carriers. So this is also used for prophylaxis in neutropenic patients. So who are these patients who are prone to develop neutropenia? So patients who are treated with chemotherapeutic agents. So as part of the prophylaxis, they may receive ciprofloxacin or ofloxacin prior to the uh, chemotherapeutic agent, the treatment of cancer patients. There are these respiratory fluoroquinolones because they are primarily used for against the atypical pneumonia agents, and this includes the third generation, including your levofloxacin. So the gatifloxacin, Gemi, and the moxifloxacin, they are all considered as the respiratory fluoroquinolones. Among the adverse effects, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea are the most common. But this can cause problems of the liver function tests, skin rashes, insomnia, dizziness, and headache. This is not a given prior to or during pregnancy because of the damage in the growing cartilage and can cause atrophy, uh, tendonitis, and your atrophy. And this is excreted in the breast milk, and this can cause peripheral neuropathy. So this is the second drug now that is contraindicated during pregnancy. Tendonitis is a rare complication of quinolone, and this has been reported in adults. And this is potentially more serious because of the risk of tendon rupture. So the risk factor for tendonitis include advanced age, renal insufficiency, and concurrent use of steroids. Arthropathy is the effect of fluoroquinolones in the growing cartilage. So, actually, these drugs are not routinely recommended for patients under 18 years old. Um, the cause is this so-called Charcot-Marie Tooth syndrome. Quinolones has its own adverse effect like photosensitivity that has been reported with lomefloxacin and pefloxacin, and prolongation of the QT interval that may occur with GATI, LIBO, GEMI, and moxifloxacin. So these drugs should be avoided or used with caution in patients with known QT interval prolongation or uncorrected hypokalemia, and those who are receiving your quinidine and procainamide as well as the class 3 antiarrhythmic agents, your sotalol, ibutilide, and amiodarone, and in patient receiving other agents known to increase the QT interval, so that includes your erythromycin and antidepressant. Gatifloxacin is associated with hyperglycemia, so in diabetic patient, and with hypoglycemia in patient also receiving oral hypoglycemic agent. And because of these serious effects and some fatalities, gatifloxacin has been withdrawn in other countries. It can also elevate the level of theophylline, so there's a drug interaction between these two. We are now on the third part of my lecture. So that includes the miscellaneous drugs, including these urinary antiseptics. So let's compare the three drugs first, the metronidazole, mupirocin, and polymyxin, and then your fidaxomicin, nitrofurantoin, and methylamine. Metronidazole is a nitroimidazole antiprotozoa actually. So this is a drug of choice in the treatment of extraluminal amoebiasis. While mupirocin is a pseudomonic acid and polymyxin is cationic detergents that is composed of polymyxin A and polymyxin B. If you look at the pharmacokinetics, the antibacterial activity, as I said, your metronidazole is against the amoeba. Even the anaerobes has a good activity with metronidazole, and like your Bacteroides and your Clostridium species. While your mupirocin is active against the Staphylococcus aureus, and the polymyxin is basic peptide that is active in gram-negative and gram-positive organism. That includes the Proteus and the Neisseria gonorrhea, which are both resistant to your polymyxin. With pharmacodynamics, the metronidazole is selectively absorbed by the anaerobic bacteria and sensitive protozoa, and once taken up by the anaerobes, it is non-enzymatically reduced by reacting with the reduced ferredoxin. And the end product, this reduction result in products that is toxic to anaerobic cells and allow for their selective accumulation in anaerobes. So the metabolites of metronidazole that is taken up by the bacterial DNA forming the unstable molecule. So this action only occurs when metronidazole is partially reduced, and because this reduction usually happens only in anaerobic cells, it has relatively little effect on human cells or aerobic bacteria. While your mupirocin is an inhibitor of the isolysyl tRNA synthase, and polymyxin B uh, disrupt the bacterial membrane and inactivate the endotoxins. Metronidazole is well absorbed orally and reaches the serum level of 4 to 6 microgram after 250 milligram oral dose. So the drug is has a low proton binding capacity in about 10 to 20%. Its half-life is of the unchanged drug is 7.5 hours. But this drug can also penetrates the CSF and the brain, reaching the level similar to those in the serum. Same with that of your mupirocin and the polymyxin that is commonly mixed with your bacitracin and neomycin. Metronidazole is metabolized in the liver, and plasma clearance is decreased in impaired liver function. Uh, this drug is mainly excreted in the urine, and it has a drug interaction with the coumarin type anticoagulants, with phenytoin and phenobarbital, and cimetidine. Both on the coumarin anticoagulant and the phenytoin and phenobarbital, they have an potentiating effect, or it enhances the elimination of this drug, while it decreases the plasma clearance of this cimetidine. Metronidazole has a very good activity in anaerobic and intra-abdominal infection, even in amoebic infection, because this is the drug of choice, and vaginitis that is caused by trichomonas and bacterial vaginosis, and in patients with antibiotic-associated enterocolitis caused by Clostridium difficile and brain abscess. Mupirocin, that is drug that is available for patients who are post-operative. No, they are used as an ointment among patients who are post um, Explore Lab, for example, or Post CS, no? So ito yung ginagamit para sa kanilang sugat. This is in cream form or in ointment. Or sometimes this is used for impetigo or intranasal application for elimination of the methicillin-resistant uh, S. aureus carriage. The mupirocin, this may develop low level of resistance due to the point of mutation in the gene of the target enzyme. So this level of resistance does not lead to clinical failure, but the high level of resistance that is due to your isoleucine, second isoleucine tRNA synthase, which is plasmid encoded and commonly caused by the hospital outbreak of Staphylococcus aureus and colonization, while polymyxin B is used for the treatment of serious enteric infection that is caused by E. coli, Shigella, Enterobacter, Klebsiella, Pseudomonas, but not Proteus species. Metronidazole has several preparations, so be careful in instructing your patient. Like this is available in as a vaginal tablet, no, for treatment of vaginitis and bacterial vaginosis. So it's very important that you instruct your patient well, no, kasi baka mamaya yung tablet, instead of placing it inside the vagina, ininom ng pasyente, no? So you will need to instruct your patient very well in the preparation of this metronidazole. Unlike the mupirocin and polymyxin, both of them are available in ointment. So this is for topical use. For adverse effect, no, metronidazole can cause stomatitis, nausea and diarrhea, and vomiting. So if a patient experiences this adverse effect, you can advise them to take it with meal. Or sometimes tea-colored urine and seizure and peripheral neuropathy. And this is contraindicated among patients who are alcoholic because if you will take metronidazole at the same time with the alcohol, patient will experience the so-called disulfiram-like effect or the metallic taste. While mupirocin is used for wound but not for the decubitus ulcer or open surgical wound. So lahat lang ng clean wound. So yung mga na-CS or na-explore lab for not for a dirty wound because of the emergence of these resistant strains. Fidaxomicin is a macrocyclic antibiotic. So this is has a narrow spectrum and an inhibitor of protein synthesis by binding the sigma subunit of RNA polymerase. Their activity is against gram-positive aerobe, anaerobe, but they lack the activity against gram-negative bacteria. They are given orally and it's absorbed systemically, that is negligible, but with fecal concentration that is high. This is used for the treatment of difficile colitis in adult, and they are as effective as the oral vancomycin, so may be associated with lower rates of relapsing disease. So that is your fidaxomicin. These two drugs naman, your nitrofurantoin and methenamine, your mandalate and hippurate, they are used as a urinary antiseptics. So nitrofurantoin has an antibacterial activity that is correlate with rapid intracellular conversion to highly reactive intermediates by bacterial reductases. So these intermediates react with the non-specifically with many ribosomal protein and causing the disruption of the synthesis of protein, RNA, and DNA. There's no cross resistance with other antimicrobials, and the resistance emerges slowly. While your methenamine, so at low pH, methenamine releases your formaldehyde, and this formaldehyde is the one that is antibacterial. Nitrofurantoin is bactericidal for many gram-positive and gram-negative. However, there are some strains that are resistant, and these are the Pseudomonas aeruginosa and the Proteus. And the long-acting formulation can be taken twice daily. So each long-acting capsule contains two forms of nitrofurantoin, the macrocrystalline nitrofurantoin and the nitrofurantoin monohydrate. So 25% is macrocrystalline, which has a slower dissolution and absorption than the monohydrate. So the remaining 75% is the monohydrate that is contained in a powder blend, which upon exposure to gastric and intestinal fluid will form a gel matrix that releases the nitrofurantoin over time. So the drug should not be used for upper urinary tract infection, and it is desirable to keep the urinary pH below 5.5, but this is well absorbed after ingestion. Uh, After a single dose of nitrofurantoin, it can prevent the recurrent urinary tract infection in some women. While your methenamine, this mandelin, and hippuric acid is excreted as in the urine. The nitrofurantoin is contraindicated among patients with renal insufficiency. So those with creatinine clearance of less than 60 ml per minute. This is used for recurrent UTI infection, as I mentioned earlier, but not for upper urinary tract infection. It has a drug interaction with nalidixic acid. While methenamine is an antiseptic to suppress and not to treat the urinary tract infection. So this methenamine is not given together with the sulfonamide form. It will form an insoluble compound with your formaldehyde. So the usefulness of this drug, your nitrofurantoin and methenamine, is limited to the lower urinary tract. As to the adverse effect, nitrofurantoin can cause nausea and vomiting, which are the principal side effects of nitrofurantoin. Also includes neuropathies and hemolytic anemia that can occur among patients with G6PD. Nitrofurantoin antagonizes the action of nalidixic acid, and this nitrofurantoin can cause rashes, pulmonary infiltration, and fibrosis, and hypersensitivity are reported among the use of this nitrofurantoin. So that's all about the metronidazole, the antiparasitic anaerobic drug, and the mupirocin and polymyxin, the drug that is prepared in cream form, and your fidaxomicin, and your urinary antiseptics, your nitrofurantoin and methenamine. This is the last part of my topic, which is the clinical application of these antimicrobials. When these antibiotics are used prior to the identification of the responsible pathogen, no, and you already started the patient on antibiotics, the term that is used for that kind of treatment is empiric treatment. What are the different approaches in the empiric treatment? So number one is formulate a clinical diagnosis of microbial infection. So determine the clinical syndrome compatible with the infection. So like for example, in a patient who is suffering from pneumonia or cellulitis or sinusitis, so the presentation may differ one over the other. So for example, pneumonia, so the patient will arrive at the emergency room complaining of cough and sometimes fever. Um, Unlike yung cellulitis, the appearance of the skin may be warm, and if you examine their extremities, they appear warm and tender. And of course, sinusitis, so there's pain that is accompanied by watery nasal discharge. So the presentation may differ, so you can think of what is the possible cause or what is the clinical diagnosis based on the presenting symptom of patients. Obtain the specimen for a laboratory examination that can be examined by microscopy. And the specimen should be appropriate for the infection. So, for example, patient came in with dysuria or dribbling of urine or pain in urination, no? So, definitely, ang i-request mo is a urinalysis. Or sometimes, ang pinaka mabilis na test are your complete blood count that will give you an idea of if the patient is suffering from infection. Or sometimes you can collect a sample or fluids that is used for culture depending on the anatomic sites, like the blood, sputum, or even urine or CSF or stool. You can also have the non-culture method, the antigen testing, your polymerase chain reaction, and serology that may also confirm with the specific etiologic agent. Because ideally, before you start a patient on antibiotics, if the patient is suffering from infection, ideally you need to do your culture and sensitivity. Kaya lang, because of its cost, hindi siya routinely ginagawa dito sa atin. This is an example of the simple microscopy. So by just getting the sample and putting your request as a gram stain so they can easily identify. So masasabi mo na kung siya ba ay gram positive or gram negative or siya ba ay cocci or siya ba ay bacilli. So as you have an idea of what type of antibiotic you're going to give to this patient. Kailan ka available? Siguro sa Thursday, samahan mo ako if ever. This is the culture and sensitivity. Kaya lang ang result ng culture and sensitivity hindi yan immediate because it will take time. So around 3 days or 5 days before you have the result of the culture and sensitivity. So this will serve you naman as a guide in the further treatment of your patients who is suffering from infection. Unlike nung gram stain, ang gram stain mabilis kasi pagka kumula ka ng specimen, right then and then you can just wait for the result and that will guide you now on the start of your antibiotics, on the choice of the drug that you're going to give to the patient. Microbiologic diagnosis is also an important approach in the empiric treatment. That's why it's necessary to have the history, physical exam, and the immediate laboratory result like the gram stain of urine or sputum. And it may provide highly specific information. So for example, a young man with urethritis, so gram stain agad kasi lalo na kung may history of unprotected sexual intercourse. So you do the gram stain from the urethral meatus. and it may present with an intracellular gram-negative diplococci. So most probably, alam mo na kung ano ang sakit ni patient. And if there is, most likely, the pathogen is Neisseria gonorrhea. So alam mo na kung ano ibibigay mo na antibiotics. So there are times naman that the clinician should be aware that there is a significant patient with gonococcal urethritis that have gram-negative, gram stain for the organism. And that significant number of patients with gonococcal urethritis may harbor concurrent chlamydial infection that may not be demonstrated in the gram stain smear. Kasi nga, most of these patients with Neisseria gonorrhea, there is a concurrent chlamydial infection. So, ang ibibigay mong gamot is against Neisseria gonorrhea, and at the same time, magbibigay ka na rin ng antibiotic against the chlamydial infection. So that is the so-called microbiologic diagnosis. So this is an example of the antibiogram that is commonly posted in the hospital, because this is where the organisms that were isolated in that particular hospital is listed, at kung saang antibiotic siya resistant or saang antibiotic siya sensitive. So it is written there and posted as a guide for the start of these antimicrobials. The next approach is to determine the necessity for the empiric treatment. So whether or not you will initiate the empiric treatment, that is an important decision based partly on experience. So may nakita ka ng kasong ganito dati, so gusto mo nang mag-start ng antibiotics kasi that was your experience, or some of data based on the clinical trials. So, because this empiric treatment is indicated when there is a significant risk of serious morbidity and mortality if this therapy is withheld until a specific pathogen is detected by the clinical laboratory. So, in some setting, for a public health reason, no, so pwede ka na mag-start ng empirical treatment. So, for example, again, the urethritis in a young man that requires treatment with for Neisseria gonorrhea and Chlamydia trachomatis, even in the absence of the microbiologic confirmation at the time of diagnosis. So, because of the risk of non-compliance with this follow-up visit in this patient, so that may lead to the transmission to other person, because this is a sexually transmitted pathogen, and that is the reason why kailangan mo nang mag-start ng antibiotic for that particular patient, kasi pwede siyang makahawa sa ibang tao kapag ka nagkaroon siya ng sexual activity with other person. Just to show you that the drug, prior to its release in the market, they are processed from or based on some clinical trials. So from preclinical to different phases until na ma-approve siya ng FDA at bago siya magamit sa mga pasyente. Lastly, for the approach that is institute treatment, so selection of the empiric treatment may be based on the microbiologic diagnosis or clinical diagnosis, even without the available microbiologic clues. Because if no microbiologic information is available, you can start the broad spectrum, no, the antimicrobial spectrum of agent or agents that may be necessary, that is broad, so as taking into account the different pathogen that is responsible for the illness ng pasyente. Paano bang pumili ng antimicrobial agents? So, how do you select these drugs? These are the consideration in selection of antimicrobial. So, Tingnan mo kung ano yung klase ng bacteria that is inhibited by each drug, the bacteria that is commonly associated based on the anatomic site, or the antibiotics that can attain the high concentration on that specific site. And of course, always consider the antibiotic resistance, and that is part of the selection of antimicrobials. Okay, so let's start with the empirical treatment based on the antimicrobial etiology. So we will just focus on the bacteria, no? Because in the book or in some information, nakalagay doon yung mga parasite, fungal infection, and other infections. So we will just focus on the bacteria for this purpose of lecture. So in this slide, the drug of choice is either your trimethoprim and cephalosporin for Moraxella cataralis. And in patients with Neisseria gonorrhea, so ito yung mga na-diagnose or nagkaroon ng gram stain that has an evidence of an intracellular diplococci, patient will complain of a discharge, penile discharge, or any vaginal discharge. And if you look at the history, meron silang history ng unprotected sex. And the identifiable cause is a Neisseria gonorrhea. So you may start the patient on ceftriaxone or cefixime. And remember that this is a sexually transmitted infection. So hindi lang yung pasyente ang bibigyan mo ng gamot, but also the partner of this patient. For Neisseria meningitidis naman, this drug of choice is your penicillin G. Based on this pathogen, so ano ang common presentation ng pasyente? So dadating sila sa emergency or sa outpatient complaining of diarrhea, no? Itong mga organisms na to. Like for example, E. coli, Klebsiella, and Proteus. So alam mo na that you're going to start your first generation or second generation cephalosporin or your trimethoprim. Same with the Enterobacter, Citrobacter, and Serratia that can be started with trimethoprim and quinolone as well as with your carbapenem for these agents. Shigella and Salmonella, you can also start with your quinolone. So patients commonly presents with diarrhea in this particular microorganism. Campylobacter jejuni can start your macrolide, erythromycin, or your azithromycin. And with Brucella, combination of doxycycline and rifampicin or your aminoglycoside. Your Helicobacter pylori is commonly isolated among patients with peptic ulcer disease. So sometimes patient will present with abdominal pain or epigastric pain. So when they underwent this endoscopy and they got the biopsy and they look for the culture of this microorganism, once that the Helicobacter pylori is identified, aside from the proton pump inhibitor na ibibigay sa pasyente, dadagdagan siya ng antibiotics because that can kill the microorganism. That's by giving your amoxicillin and your clarithromycin. Ito namang Vibrio, so ano ang common presentation? Diarrhea, di ba? Ito yung watery, watery stool. So they are receiving the drug of choice is tetracycline with the anti-pseudomonal penicillin, and that is combined with aminoglycoside for the treatment of Pseudomonas aeruginosa. So microorganism that belongs to the gram-positive cocci, the aerobic, may receive the penicillin or the giving of your clindamycin. So these are for Streptococcus species. For Staph aureus and beta-lactamase negative, you can give your penicillin, but for beta-lactamase positive, this patient will receive penicillinase-resistant penicillin. And for methicillin-resistant, vancomycin is the drug of choice. and combination of penicillin and aminoglycoside for Enterococcus species. Non-anthracite bacillus will the drug of choice is vancomycin, while listeria is with ampicillin, and nocardia is with sulfonamide or sulfadiazine or combination of trimethoprim and sulfamethoxazole. Anaerobes like your Clostridia, Peptococcus actinomyces, Peptostreptococcus that is with penicillin and clindamycin. And the rest may receive metronidazole. Your Clostridium, your Bacteroides, Fusobacterium, Prevotella, and your Porphyromonas will respond with metronidazole, clindamycin, or penicillin. For this microorganism naman, protein synthesis inhibitors with your tetracycline and erythromycin for mycoplasma, as well as in your chlamydia trachomatis with tetracycline and acithro, and your chlamydia pneumonia, and that is with azithromycin. Spirochetes, the drug of choice are doxycycline or amoxicillin, and for ceftriaxone for late Borrelia. While in leptospirosis, the drug of choice is penicillin and Treponema pallidum caused by syphilis, and that is the drug of choice is also penicillin. Okay, now this time the empiric treatment is based on the site of infection. This is for acute bacterial endocarditis, and the common pathogen is the S. aureus. The drug of choice your vancomycin and ceftriaxone, while in the SBE, which the common pathogen is the viridans, streptococci, and enterococci, the drug of choice is a combination of penicillin and gentamicin. The common presentation of patient with septic arthritis, no? So meron silang history of pain among in the joints, no? And if you examine, it's warm and tender, uh, and it's usually swollen, no? Like this in this picture, no? Namamaga yung kanyang tuhod. So, and febrile ang pasyente. So this is an example of the septic arthritis. So if you look at the drug of choice for septic arthritis, depende kung siya ay child or adult, but the treatment is the same, giving your vancomycin and your ceftriaxone. Patients with otitis media, so ano ang common complaint? So meron silang ear discharge. So pag silip mo sa tenga ng pasyente, bulging ang tympanic membrane at meron kang makikita na ear discharge. So your impression is an otitis media, and if that is your impression, the drug of choice is amoxicillin. This one naman is, ang presentation is a warmth on the skin. If you look at the past medical history or ng pasyente, so the patient sometimes is diabetic, and then pagkita mo sa kanilang balat, no, merong namumula. So there are signs again of inflammation. And this cellulitis, ang drug of choice, so because it is commonly caused by S. aureus and group A streptococcus, ang first generation cephalosporin as well as for penicillinase resistant penicillin. So that is the choice of drug based on the site of this infection. So the summary of the four conditions that was initially mentioned. your bacterial endocarditis, septic arthritis, your acute otitis media and or sinusitis, and last is cellulitis. Meningitis may differ in its presentation whether siya ay toddler or children and adult because even in the treatment of meningitis among the neonates, ang drug of choice is ampicillin and cephalosporin, the third generation cephalosporin. And a bit older, no, ang ibinibigay ay ceftriaxone or cefotaxime with or without your vancomycin. But if the patient is an adult presenting with meningitis, ang drug of choice is ceftriaxone or your cefotaxime. Peritonitis due to ruptured bowel, no? So they are treated differently because this can cause by coliform and the bacteroides. So anaerobic ang target. So that's why you need to give the metronidazole in combination with the third generation cephalosporin or combination of piperacillin and tazobactam. So pneumonia, so alam na alam nyo na to because this is your case that was discussed last week. No, so that will depend on the severity of the pneumonia as well as the age of the patient. Kasi kung neonate, iba yung gamot and compare with a child and adult. And the treatment may differ as well whether you will give the drug or start the drug as an outpatient management or an inpatient management. Okay, so these are the choices of agent that is used for patient with pneumonia. So, in a patient who is presenting with these signs and symptoms of infection, it worsened to a sepsis and even septic shock and leading to the multiple organ dysfunction syndrome that eventually kung hindi makontrol, what will happen to the patient? So mamamatay yung pasyente. So that's why in patients with septicemia or septicemia with granulocytopenia, mas mataas na klase ng antibiotics ang ibibigay natin like for the drugs that are presented in this slide. Okay, this time, what are the factors that are need to be considered in choosing the right antimicrobial agents? Host factor start with concomitant disease states, no? Like for example, if the patient is diabetic or hypertensive or there are some liver or kidney problem that you need to adjust the dose of the drug or some drugs may be contraindicated. Prior adverse effect is also very important when you start your antimicrobials. Kaya nga kapag ka magsa-start ka ng antibiotics, always ask your patient, meron po ba kayong allergy because that is the common, no? May allergy po ba kayo sa antibiotics? So kailan mo ba, when what instances does this patient receive antibiotics? So for example, nagpabunot siya ng ipin, and that is very common, no, scenario. So I'll always ask them when they were started with antibiotics kung nagkaroon sila ng problema. So kung wala naman, pwede kang magbigay ng antibiotics na para sa pasyente. Impaired elimination and detoxification of the drug is also considered. Even the age of the patient, kaya nga especially among the young patient, no, these antibiotics are commonly computed based on the recommended dose. Pregnancy status, so ito yung mga drugs, no, yung mga nabanggit ni Doktora ko na hindi pwedeng ibigay sa buntis and at the same time mga drugs na nabanggit natin earlier that is contraindicated during pregnancy because this may affect the fetus, especially during the period of organogenesis. And some of the epidemiologic status that is considered for the choosing your antimicrobials. This slide naman will show you the pharmacologic factors that is also considered, no, like the absorption, distribution, and elimination of the drug, no, the delivery to the site of infection, and the toxicity, as well as the interaction with other drugs that is to be considered in choosing this antimicrobial agent. So what's your guide in looking for the established infection? So susceptibility testing, that is testing the bacterial pathogen in vitro for their susceptibility on the antimicrobial agent. So this is extremely valuable in confirming the susceptibility because it can ideally to a narrow spectrum non-toxic antimicrobial agent. So these tests measure the concentration of drug required to inhibit the growth of the microorganism, so that is the MIC, or your minimal inhibitory concentration, or the ability of the drug to kill the organism, and that is the MBC, or the minimal bactericidal concentration. So the results of these tests that can be correlated with the known drug concentration in various body compartments. So only MICs are routinely measured in most infection, whereas in infection in which the bactericidal therapy is required for eradication of infection, just like in meningitis, endocarditis, and even sepsis. So MBC measurement usually, occasionally may be useful. Some of the specialized assay, no, so that includes your beta-lactamase assay and your synergy studies. So the beta-lactamase assay, like for some bacteria like your Haemophilus species, the susceptibility pattern of strain are similar except for the production of beta-lactamase. So in these cases, extensive susceptibility testing may not be required, and a direct test for beta-lactamase using the chromogenic beta-lactam substrate, so that is used as a substitute, no, for this type of infection. While your synergy study are the in vitro test to attempt the measurement of the synergistic or the additive or the indifferent or antagonistic drug interaction. So in general, these tests have not been standardized and not even correlated with clinical outcome. How will you monitor the therapeutic response? So microbiologically, so you will wait for the result of the culture. So kung nagpa-culture ka, so tingnan mo kung saan siya sensitive or saan siya resistant dun sa mga antibiotics. So it's very important na naka-coordinate ka with the laboratory kasi baka mamaya nag-start ka ng antibiotics, ng empiric treatment, hindi naman siya isinama ng laboratory kasi hindi available on disk. So how would you know that the microbiologic response is okay with your antibiotics that was started, no? So coordinate with the laboratory if the discs are available. So for example, nag-start ka ng ceftriaxone, cefixime, and then mamaya hindi naman pala siya available. So wala kang makitang result from the microbiologic point of view. But what is more important and what is should be checked initially are the clinical response ng pasyente, no? Ano ba yung mga systemic manifestations na meron ang pasyente? For example, dumating siya, nag-fever, nagka-cough, just like in your previous case, no? Nag-lice ba ang fever after 72 hours? Nung inauscultate mo ba siya, nawala na ba yung kanyang good air entry na ba ang pasyente? No? Wala na siyang wheezes, wala na siyang crackle, wala nang rhonchi, no? So wala nang symptoms ang pasyente. Or if you look at the patient, yung well-being niya improved na, no? Dati hindi siya kumakain, ngayon kumakain na ang pasyente. So these are the clinical manifestation that the patient is improving with what antibiotics you have started among patients who are suffering from infection, no? Always look at the vital signs, the blood pressure ng pasyente, the respiratory rate, the pulse rate, the temperature, no? So yan ang magbibigay sa iyo ng hint if the patient responded with the antibiotics na ibinigay mo sa pasyente. So vital signs ang pinaka-importante na minimeasure at tinitingnan for the clinical response of your patient. Others are the duration of therapy for cure. So, depende kung saan ang pathogen. So, kung nasa brain, no, so medyo matagal. Pero kung halimbawang nasa balat lang naman ang infection, no, so that can also affect the response of this patient. And of course, the status, ano bang pasyente mo, immunocompromised. Baka naman naka-steroid ang pasyente mo or diabetic ang patient mo or meron talaga siyang poor wound healing, no? So kung ang infection niya is nasa balat and the patient is a diabetic or patients who are receiving chemotherapeutic agent, so this will affect the response para sa antibiotic na in-start mo sa pasyente. And failure of treatment, so that's why kailangan mong imbestigahan. The systemic investigation should be done. Look at the dose, no? Baka naman mamaya mali ang computation mo ng gamot, ng recommended dose. Or baka naman yung compliance ng pasyente kaya hindi siya gumagaling. No? So these are the things that will affect the response of patient who are receiving antibiotics. So identify the drug, whether the drug is a bactericidal or bacteriostatic. No? So static is to inhibit the growth, cidal is to kill the microorganism. So in the cidal activity, concentration dependent and time dependent. So what is the difference between the two? As you increase the concentration, the killing is increased, and that is exemplified by aminoglycoside and quinolone. So for example, you start the patient on aminoglycoside, so gentamicin that is supposedly given 80 milligram every 8 hours through IV. So ibibigay mo siya ngayon based on its killing ability as a concentration dependent, you will just give the drug gentamicin 240 milligrams once a day. So which has a better killing ability? So the 80 milligrams every 8 hours or the 240 milligrams as a once daily dosing. So syempre, the 240 kasi nga the activity of the drug is concentration-dependent killing. Unlike itong time-dependent killing, which has the bactericidal activity as long as the serum concentration are greater than the MBC. So like the beta-lactam. So for example naman is ampicillin, 500 milligrams that you will give it to the patient at 4 times a day. So dapat ibibigay mo siya on a specific time. So kung 4 times, you give the drug every 6 hours. So kung 6 ng umaga, ang next dose ay alas 12, ang next dose ay alas 6 ng gabi, at ang next dose ay alas 12 ng madaling araw. So that is on a specific time because you wanted to maintain the serum concentration because that is the activity or the cidal activity of that particular agent because that is a time-dependent killing. Although pareho silang magre-receive ng 4 na beses sa isang araw, pero mas specified ang time at mas sustained ang serum concentration if you give it on a specified time. Kasi parang kung 4 times, pwede mo siyang bigyan, o sige, agahan, tanghalian, hapunan, bago matulog. 4 na beses pa rin, pero iba-iba ng oras, no? Po pwedeng ganon. But this drug is based on the time dependent, kaya dapat you have to write down that on at that particular time, isusulat mo yan sa prescription pad or sa iyong doctor's order that the drug should be given on this particular time if you want to give it on an every 6 hours basis. So these are the list of the cidal and the static agents. No? So, dun sa ating kadidiscuss lang, now if you look at the static, so the nitrofurantoin, your sulfonamide, no, your trimethoprim, so nandyan yan sa static. Unlike your cidal drug that includes the quinolones, no, nandyan siya sa bactericidal agent. PAE or the post-antibiotic effect is the persistent suppression of the bacterial growth after the limited exposure to the antimicrobial agent. So that is how you define your post-antibiotic effect. So it reflects the time required for the bacteria to return to the logarithmic growth. So in vivo, the PAE is usually much longer than in vitro PAE. That is due to the PALE or your post-antibiotic leukocyte enhancement and exposure of bacteria to the sub-inhibitory antibiotic concentration. So this is exemplified by your aminoglycoside and quinolone. Listed here are the post-antibiotic effects with more plus or minus 1.5 hours against the gram-negative bacilli and gram-positive cocci. This naman is the pharmacokinetics consideration. So, yung route of administration, whether that is oral or IV. So, syempre, kung hindi naman makakainom ang pasyente, always consider that kung dyspneic ang pasyente, paano siya iinom ng antibiotics? So, kailangan ibigay mo siya. So, for example, ang kanyang complaint ay pneumonia, no? Ang RR ay 28 o no or 30, so the patient is toxic, no, or sometimes the patient is already intubated, so how will you give your oral medication? Kung talagang ang preparation ng gamot is just an oral at wala kang choice, so sometimes naka-NGT ang pasyente, so through the NGT dun sa pinapadaan, no. But most of the time, if the patient is critically ill or having all of these condition, no, parenteral ang kanyang choice ng administration of this drug, no. Some of the drugs that you need to adjust in the presence of renal or hepatic impairment. So, cases or antibiotics that needs to be adjusted in the presence of renal impairment as well as the one that is contraindicated. So, yung halos yung mga diniscuss natin, methenamine, nalidixic acid, nitrofurantoin, the long-acting sulfonamide, no? So, contraindicated for in the presence of a renal impairment. And the last group are the drugs that you need to adjust in the presence of an hepatic impairment. This group of drugs naman are the selected antimicrobials wherein they have a better CSF concentration in the presence of an inflamed meninges, no? So mas nagpe-penetrate siya sa CSF kung merong signs of inflammation. So from the CSF concentration of an inflamed, mas tumaas yung value niya or the percentage when you have an inflamed. So meaning it's better to give in the patients among patients with an inflamed meninges. How do you monitor toxicity, no, or how can you avoid toxicity of this antimicrobial? Kasi nga ang common problem with antibiotics is the hypersensitivity. That's why you have to always ask your patient if there's a history or nagkaroon na ba siya ng symptoms that is related to allergy after the patient took a certain antibiotic. So you have to be careful in giving this antibiotic to persons with hypersensitivity reaction. So listed or I will discuss later kung ano ang mga pwedeng gawin to avoid or to manage this antimicrobial drug toxicity. Some antibiotics are kailangan na mag-skin test, no? So, you will use your tuberculin syringe to create this will, no? Kung ikaw ay clerk na at intern, so commonly kayo ang babasa niyan. Tatawagin kayo ng nurse kasi kung namula siya or nagkaroon ng pamumula sa palibot ng ah, bilog na yan, hindi mo pwedeng ibigay ang antibiotic. So that's why if you want to give it as an order, so antibiotic like ampicillin, 500 milligrams through IV, ANST. Anong ibig sabihin ng ANST? After negative skin test. Sometimes the drug, like for example, in the treatment of syphilis in pregnancy, so there's the so-called desensitization. So meron siyang different doses and different strength and different volume. So yung preparation kung paano ibinibigay, so that's how you desensitize patients with using this formula. Okay, what is the rationale? Bakit kailangan ibigay in combination? So just like in your chemo agent, no, broad spectrum in the empiric treatment, polymicrobial in its effect, or the to decrease the emergence of resistance or the dose-related toxicity, and enhancement of the inhibition of killing if there's a combination of these uh, agent. So that is by either potentiation or by synergistic action. So that is the advantage of combining these agents. The need for synergism in combination of antimicrobial is already established. Like for example, in the treatment of enterococcal endocarditis, no? So the bactericidal activity is very essential for the management of this condition, yung bactericidal endocarditis. So if your penicillin or ampicillin is in combination with your gentamicin or streptomycin, that is proven to be superior to monotherapy of giving your penicillin or vancomycin alone, no? So because some drugs may only have the bacteriostatic, so and that is against the enterococcal isolate. And if you combine it with aminoglycoside, so mas maganda ang activity ng antibiotics if they are given in combination. So the very common example is the treatment of enterococcal uh, endocarditis. So other examples is the blockade of the sequential steps in metabolic sequence, just like what I discussed earlier, the combination of trimethoprim and sulfamethoxazole. So that is a very good example of the mechanism of synergy in blocking the two sequential steps in the folic acid pathway. Second is the inhibition of enzymatic inactivation. So this is the major mechanism of antibiotic, which is a major mechanism of antibiotic resistance. So this inhibition, like for example of beta-lactamase by the beta-lactam inhibitor, like your sulbactam, that can result into synergism. So that's why it is combined with this antibiotic. Last is the enhancement of antimicrobial uptake. And this is exemplified by the penicillin and other cell wall agent that can increase the uptake of your aminoglycoside, no? So that by your several bacteria like the staphylococci, enterococci, strep, and their pseudomonas aeruginosa. So your enterococci that are thought to be intrinsically resistant to aminoglycoside because of the permeability barriers. And similarly, your amphotericin B is thought to enhance the uptake of your flucytosine by this fungal infection. So these are the established mechanism on the antimicrobial synergism: the blockade of sequential step, inhibition of enzymatic inactivation, and enhancement of antimicrobial uptake. Antagonism naman occur when combined inhibitory or killing effect of two or more antimicrobials. So this is inhibition of cidal activity by the static agent. Kaya huwag mo silang pagko-combinin. Like for example, the bacteriostatic tetracycline and chloramphenicol. So it can antagonize the action of the cidal cell wall active agent like your uh, because the cell wall active agents require that the bacteria be actively growing and dividing. So kaya kapag kinumbine mo ang tetracycline and chloramphenicol with the cidal agent, so this can affect and this can antagonize the effect of the other drug. Or sometimes naman the induction of the enzymatic inactivation. So some gram-negative bacilli, no, like your Enterobacter species or Pseudomonas or Serratia or Citrobacter, they possess the inducible beta-lactamases. So that's why your beta-lactam antibiotics such as your imipenem, cefoxitin, ampicillin, these are potent inducers of beta-lactamase production. So if an inducing agent is combined with an intrinsically active but hydrolyzable beta-lactam, such as your piperacillin, this antagonism may result. So this is the explanation of the antagonism among combination of antimicrobials. Antimicrobials can also use as a prophylactic agent, no? So yung kanina, most of the time, they are used for treatment. So ito naman ngayon, ang role ng antimicrobials as a prophylactic agent. These are the general principles of the antimicrobial prophylaxis. So it should be active against the common surgical wound pathogen, and it has a proven efficacy in clinical trials. So hindi naman ito basta-basta gagamitin. No? This is always based on a clinical trials. It must achieve the concentration greater than the MIC of the suspected pathogen, shortest possible course, no? Ideally, mas maganda na bigay mo lang siya ng isang beses, like for example, your cefazolin in patient who will undergo cesarean section or exploratory laparotomy. Kung shortened naman ang duration ng OR, so pwedeng isang dose lang. And that is already effective, and yet this is least toxic. Also, the principle includes the newer broad antibiotic should be reserved for therapy of resistant infection. Hindi yung may nabalitaan kang bagong antibiotics, yun ang gagamitin mo for prophylaxis. Wala pa naman na trial na ginagawa. So, just to use it because it's new, no? So, hindi ginagamit yon as for the prophylaxis. And of course, the cost is very important as part of the prophylaxis. Mostly in this type of surgery, the antibiotics that is used is cefazolin. So that is either with cardiac or non-cardiac or vascular or even neurosurgical or your craniotomy. So cefazolin is the drug of choice. Combination of cefazolin and metronidazole for orthopedic cases, and cefazolin for gastroduodenal and biliary type of operation. Colorectal surgery may differ depending on its need. So kung elective ang surgery, bigay ka lang ng oral erythromycin and neomycin. Pero kung emergency or there's the presence of obstruction, so agad-agad kailangan mo ng operahan. So the drug that is given is parenteral, of course, and that is with your cefoxitin or cefotitan or cefazolin plus your metronidazole. The same set of drugs that is used for a non-perforated appendectomy. So among patients naman na tatanggalan ng matres with hysterectomy, the choice is by giving your cefazoline or cefotetan or combination again of cefazoline and metronidazole. For C-section, cefazoline is used alone as for the prophylaxis prior to the cesarean section. So kung elective ang CS, so for example, second baby, previous CS siya dati, so inadmit siya kahapon o operahan siya ngayon, no? So the drug prior to the operation is your cefazoline. Non-surgical conditions, no, na po pwedeng bigyan ng prophylaxis, like for example anthrax, you give your ciprofloxacin or doxycycline. Or kung nasa San Lazaro ka at nag-rotate ka ng isang ward doon, no, may ward doon ng cholera, no, all cases of cholera. So you are exposed to case like this, so pwedeng magkaroon ka ng prophylaxis using your tetracycline. For diphtheria, and when there is an unimmunized contact, so you give your penicillin and erythromycin. And for patients who will undergo dental procedure or oral or upper respiratory tract procedure, and they are prone to develop endocarditis, bigyan mo siya ng amoxicillin or your clindamycin. Okay, let's focus now here in the group B strep infection. So ito yung mga binibigyan ng ampicillin at penicillin. So kung ang mother has cervical or vaginal GBS colonization and their newborns with one or more of the following, they should receive this type of prophylaxis. So kung pumutok na yung kanilang bag of waters, no, so there's a rupture of membrane, that is before term, so pwedeng bigyan mo yan. Or kapag ka nagkaroon na ng rupture of membrane ng 12 oras at mahigit, so for dumating ang pasyente ngayon alas 8 ng umaga, and then kahapon, kagabi pa palang pumutok yung panabigyan niya, so kailangan lang bigyan siya ng ampicillin or penicillin. Or during the labor, naglagnat ang pasyente, so that is also an indication. Or the previous history of GPS in the pregnancy, or mothers who have given birth to infant with an early GBS disease. So this is also an indication to start your prophylaxis against the group B streptococcal infection, and that is by giving ampicillin or penicillin. So in this slide, most of them are viral, no? And parasitic. So let's just focus on the meningococcal infection. So this is in close contact of the case. So for example naman, ikaw ang ambulance intern at napasama ka sa magta-transfer ng pasyenteng papuntang San Lazaro. So meron kang close contact sa isang meningococcal patient. So you should receive your rifampin or ciprofloxacin or ceftriaxone. Or in the presence of a recurrent infection because of the otitis media, amoxicillin ang indication for the prophylaxis. So in this slide, presence of your pneumococcemia, no, penicillin is the drug of choice. With the PCP, it's trimethoprim, sulfamethoxazole, and with rheumatic fever or patients with history of rheumatic fever or known rheumatic heart disease or RHD, benzathine penicillin is the drug of choice. And the last is among patients with urinary tract infection, recurrent infection, patient will benefit from receiving your trimethoprim and sulfamethoxazole. So that ends the clinical application of antimicrobials. And that ends my lecture. So if you have any questions, so I will entertain your questions.
Any question? Questions, clarifications? Sige, parang wala naman yata. Baka nabusog na kayo sa pagkain. Ipopost ko ulit ito sa Moodle, yung recording, para kung meron kayong gustong balikan. Okay? So, ipopost ko ito after I close this. So, log out kayo ng 10 o'clock. And again, reminder, 9:30, log in for your quiz, post-lecture quiz. So, si Dr. Reyes na ang